He was 72 when he came to see me. A quiet man, careful with his words, but there was something in his voice that morning. Uncertainty, maybe even a hint of shame.
"Dr. Carr," he said, "I've been doing it the same way for 50 years. Never gave it much thought. But now, something's different. Something feels off."
He wasn't sick. He wasn't on new medication. His vitals were strong, his blood work normal. But behind his eyes, I saw a different kind of struggle, the kind that doesn't show up in lab results. And when I asked a few gentle questions, the truth came to light. It wasn't what he was doing, but how he was doing it. A quiet habit, practiced for decades without guidance or reflection, had begun to take a toll on his circulation, his prostate, even his ability to feel pleasure at all. This wasn't about morality, it wasn't about shame. It was about awareness. You see, in my 35 years working with older men, men in their 60s, 70s and beyond, I've seen this pattern again and again. They come in feeling disconnected from themselves, confused about the shifts in their body, their energy, their intimacy. And often, they never imagine that something so private, so routine, could be playing a role. But it can. Masturbation, like any natural behavior, has the power to heal or to harm. Especially after 60, when your body begins to change in subtle but profound ways, the habits you once took for granted can begin to work against you. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because no one ever told you how to do it right for the man you are now. That's why I made this video. To gently shine a light on the 7 most common mistakes older men make during self-pleasure, and how those mistakes can affect your heart, your hormones, your sensitivity, and your connection with your partner, or even with yourself. And if you stay with me, I'll show you not only what needs to change, but how to reclaim this part of your life with dignity, strength, and presence. Before we begin, I ask only this. If this message speaks to you, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback helps me understand what truly matters to men like you. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and turn on that bell icon, because what we talk about here may not always be comfortable, but it's real, it's honest, and it's meant for men who are ready to live fully at every stage of life. All right, let's begin with the first and most overlooked mistake, one that's become all too common in recent years, and yet has quietly reshaped how the male brain responds to touch, arousal, and connection. Mistake 1. The trap of artificial stimulation. I've lost count of how many men, usually in their late 60s or early 70s, have sat across from me and said the same thing, almost word for word.
"Dr. Carr, I can't feel much anymore."
They speak quietly, almost embarrassed, as if it's something they did wrong, as if losing sensation means they're broken. But it doesn't. So, I ask a simple question. Tell me, how often do you rely on pornography? And that's when their eyes usually drop. Not because they're ashamed of their desire, but because they've never connected the dots. See, what most men don't realize is that the male brain, especially after 60, isn't the same as it was at 30. It's more sensitive to patterns, more vulnerable to dopamine dysregulation. And when artificial stimulation becomes the norm, your brain begins to rewire. At first, it seems harmless. A quick video, a scrolling session, nothing out of the ordinary. But over time, this becomes the new baseline. Your brain starts expecting novelty, fast, extreme, and disconnected. And when that becomes your default mode of stimulation, your body follows. The real world, your partner's touch, your own imagination, starts to feel dull by comparison. That's not aging, that's conditioning. I had a patient named George. He was 69, recently retired, healthy, active.
He told me, "Doc, I'm still attracted to my wife. I still love her, but something's changed. I can't stay present during intimacy. I need something more to feel aroused."
He wasn't broken. He wasn't uninterested. He was just overstimulated by years of digital input. His brain had adapted to a world of endless novelty, and now real life couldn't compete. What's tragic is that no one warns men about this. We talk about cholesterol, we talk about blood pressure, but we don't talk about how overstimulation slowly disconnects you from the very thing you crave most, real, grounded human connection. The good news? This is reversible, but it starts with awareness, with choosing silence over screens, stillness over scrolling. George made one simple change. He took a 2-week break from visual content. No porn, no images, just presence. At first it was hard, but by day 10, he told me,
Dr. Carr, I started to feel again. Not just arousal, emotion, connection, like I was waking up.
and that's what I want for you. Because the real danger here isn't the act. It's the disconnection from your own body, from your breath, from the slow, steady rhythm that true pleasure is built on. If you've noticed that things don't feel the same, that it takes more and more to feel less and less, it might not be your age. It might be the input. And if you're willing to step back from that, even just for a few days, you might be amazed at what your body remembers. Your sensitivity, your desire, your capacity to feel not just aroused, but alive. Let's move now to the second mistake, one that seems harmless but slowly undermines your body's foundation from the inside out. There's a moment I'll never forget.
A man named Harold, 74, came to see me after months of growing concern. Dr. Carr, he said, it's like I've forgotten how to feel. I'm doing everything the same, but it feels mechanical, rushed, empty.
And I asked him gently, how often do you take your time? He paused. He didn't need to answer. For so many men over 60, the body has adapted to a pattern that no longer fits the stage of life they're in. Tense shoulders, clenched thighs, a hunched spine over the edge of a bed. But what they don't realize is this. Every muscle you tense, every second you rush, your nervous system remembers. When self-pleasure becomes a race, not a ritual, it teaches your body to shut down rather than open up. The blood doesn't flow the same way. The pelvic floor doesn't engage with strength, it contracts with strain. And over time, those beautiful, sensitive nerves that once lit up at a single breath, they start to go quiet. Harold had developed a pattern, like many men, of collapsing into the same routine. No variation, no attention, no breath. Just pressure, speed and distraction. I told him something I now say to every patient who brings me this concern. You don't need to stop, you need to slow down. It's not just poetic advice, it's biology, because the older male body thrives on oxygen, patience and circulation. Rushing sends the opposite signal, one of stress, not intimacy. Harold agreed to try something different. For 1 week, he committed to changing his posture. He laid flat instead of sitting hunched. He focused on breathing, no rushing, no goal.
And on our next visit, his eyes lit up. Dr. Carr, he said, I felt warm again, alive again, not just down there, but here. He pointed to his chest.
That's the secret no one tells men. Pleasure isn't a destination. It's a language your body speaks, through slowness, softness, and space. So if you've been feeling disconnected, if you've wondered why climax feels flat, or your sensitivity has faded, it might not be your hormones, it might be your habits. Try softening, try pausing, try moving not for release, but for remembrance. You might be amazed by what returns. There was a man named Paul, 68 years old, former coach, retired teacher, strong-willed, sharp-minded, but lately he'd been feeling hollow.
When he came into my office, he didn't talk about sex. He talked about loneliness. He said, Dr. Carr, I don't know when it started, but I've been doing it more and more. Not because I want to, but because I don't know what else to do.
That's when I knew this wasn't about pleasure, it was about escape. And that's one of the most common mistakes I see in men over 60. Masturbation becomes a substitute for connection, not just with a partner, but with the world, with themselves. You feel the silence in the room. You feel the ache of a long day with no conversation, no touch. And it's easy to turn to something familiar, something that gives you 5 minutes of comfort. But over time, this comfort becomes a cage. You stop picking up the phone. You stop stepping outside. You stop noticing how empty the house feels. I asked him to write down, just for 1 week, how he felt before and after each time. Not what he did, just how he felt. The results were clear. Before, restless, bored, a little sad. After, calm for a moment, then emptier.
It hit him hard. He said, I thought it was helping, but I realize now it was hiding something. That's the danger of unexamined routine.
So I told Paul, let's rebuild this. Let's make this a choice, not a reflex. We worked on simple things, connection, a walk, a call to a friend, listening to music while he made dinner. And within a month he came back with more light in his eyes. He hadn't given up pleasure. He had reclaimed it. If you're using this habit as a substitute for connection, you're not broken. You're human. But your body knows the difference. And it wants more than escape. It wants meaning. Mistake 4. Ignoring the physical cost of habitual stimulation.
One morning, a patient named Victor, age 74, sat across from me with a nervous smile. "Doc," he said, "I think something's wrong with me."
He wasn't in pain. He wasn't sick. But his words carried a weight I've heard many times before.
"I used to feel everything, every touch, every sensation. Now it's like, I'm there, but I'm not." He tapped his fingers against the exam table. "It's like the music's still playing, but the volume's turned down."
And I knew what he meant. What Victor was experiencing wasn't rare. It's something I've seen in dozens of men, sometimes decades before they expect it. It starts small, a little less sensitivity, a little longer to finish, a strange dullness where there used to be spark. And the culprit? Often it's the repetition, the routine, the mechanical patterns of daily, thoughtless stimulation, without variation, without presence, without rest. See, the penis isn't just a tool. It's a complex system of nerves, blood vessels, and delicate muscular tissue. And just like any part of the body, it can be overused. When you stimulate the same area, the same way, at the same speed or pressure, day after day, the nerves begin to adapt. And eventually they stop responding the same way. It's called desensitization, and it's very real. But there's more. The erectile tissue, especially the smooth muscle that supports blood flow, requires rest and recovery. Without it, the tissue weakens, the blood vessels narrow, oxygen flow drops, and that leads to slower, softer, or even disappearing erections.
Victor looked down at the floor as I explained this. "I thought I was keeping things working," he said, "but I was just wearing it down."
He had never considered that too much of a good thing, done without awareness, could quietly be damaging the very system he was trying to protect. That's why this mistake is so dangerous. It doesn't feel like harm. It feels like routine, like something you've always done, until the day it doesn't work anymore. But the good news? The body is remarkably forgiving. When we remove the pressure, when we slow down, introduce variety, and bring mindfulness back into the act, something remarkable happens. The nerves begin to reawaken. The tissues respond. Blood flow improves. Sensation returns. Victor made small changes. He cut back the frequency. He used natural oils. He changed his position. He started breathing more intentionally. And slowly, he felt alive again. So, if you've noticed a shift, if you're wondering why things don't feel the same, it might not be your age. It might be your habit, and you can change that. Next, we'll talk about one of the most overlooked muscles in the male body, and why neglecting it could be quietly undermining both your pleasure and your control. Mistake 5. Forgetting the muscle that holds it all together. There's a small group of muscles deep in the pelvis. You can't see them. You don't flex them at the gym. And most men don't even know they exist. But these muscles, your pelvic floor, are the foundation of your sexual strength. And when they're weak, you feel it. Just not always where you expect.
I remember one man in particular, David, age 69. He came to me not because of a performance issue, but because of something stranger. A sense of leakiness, he called it. A lack of control. Subtle, but bothersome.
As we spoke, it became clear. His body was losing tone where it mattered most. The pelvic floor muscles are the unsung heroes of male health. They support the bladder. They help control ejaculation. They play a crucial role in erections, arousal, and recovery. And yet few men train them, especially after 60, when muscle tone naturally begins to decline. David had spent decades sitting for work, driving long hours, slouched on the couch, and during self-pleasure, he followed the same routine, hunched forward, seated, tense. That position? It puts pressure on the pelvic floor. Over time, the muscles weaken, the nerves compress, and you begin to lose subtle forms of control, harder to get aroused, harder to hold back, harder to feel deeply. Worse still, these changes happen slowly, quietly, and by the time a man notices, he often assumes it's just old age. But it's not. When David began working those muscles just a few minutes each day, things changed. He practiced Kegel exercises. He changed his posture during self-stimulation. He stood or lay flat. He began to breathe into his abdomen.
And slowly, the control returned. He told me later it wasn't just about sex. I felt stronger everywhere, more in my body.
This is what most men never learn. Sexuality isn't just hormones or desire. It's structure, it's circulation, it's muscular integrity. And when you neglect that base, the rest begins to wobble. So if you've been noticing small changes, less firmness, quicker finishes, or that feeling of lost power, it might not be your head. It might be your foundation. And the good news, that foundation can be rebuilt. But first, we need to talk about something even deeper, the emotional undercurrent that drives our habits when no one's watching. Mistake 6, using masturbation to numb, not to feel. This one is harder to talk about. Not because it's complicated, but because it's personal, because it doesn't show up in blood tests or scans, and yet it leaves a mark you can feel in your chest when the room goes quiet. It's the habit of using self-pleasure, not as an expression of vitality, but as an escape from something deeper.
I remember Gerald, a quiet man, 74 years old, widowed. He came in with complaints of fatigue, disinterest, and what he called a flatness in his emotions.
He wasn't depressed, not clinically, but life felt dim, colorless, and as we spoke, he admitted something most men never say out loud. He'd fallen into a pattern, not every day but often. Late at night, when the silence felt heavy, he would masturbate, not out of desire but to fill space, to feel something, anything, before drifting into sleep. At first it worked, but slowly he felt more distant, not just from others, but from himself. This is what I've seen in so many men. Masturbation used like a sleeping pill, like a mute button for loneliness, boredom, or grief. And here's the hard truth: it works. Until it doesn't. Because unlike intimacy, which connects and energizes, compulsive self-pleasure isolates. It can train the brain to avoid discomfort instead of facing it, to choose the easy chemical hit over the hard work of connection. The tragedy? Most men don't even know it's happening. They feel drained but can't explain it. They lose interest in activities that once brought joy. They withdraw from friendships, intimacy, purpose. And deep down, they carry a quiet shame. Because something that was once innocent now feels hollow. But Gerald's story didn't end there. When we explored that habit together, not with judgment but with curiosity, he began to see what he was really craving. Not release, but touch. Not climax, but closeness. Not escape, but aliveness. He began reaching out more. He joined a walking group, started journaling, even began a new relationship, cautiously, with someone he met at a local book club. And the late-night habit, it faded. Not because he forced it, but because he didn't need it anymore. That's the lesson. When masturbation is used to numb, it takes more than it gives. But when it's reclaimed, anchored in awareness, it can become part of healing, not hiding. So ask yourself gently, am I reaching for pleasure or avoiding pain? Because the answer might be the key to everything that comes next. And speaking of next, there's one more mistake we need to talk about. The one men rarely mention but almost all experience in silence. Mistake 7. Believing it's too late to change. It often begins with a sigh. A man in his 60s or 70s, sometimes older, sits across from me and says, "Doc, I guess this is just how it is now." There's resignation in his voice, a quiet defeat, as if the best years are behind him and all that's left is maintenance. But here's what I've learned after decades of walking with men through this chapter of life. It's never too late. The most dangerous mistake isn't what you do with your body, it's what you believe about it. It's the quiet conviction that change isn't possible. That sensation can't return. That passion fades for good. That's the lie that steals the most from men. I've watched 68-year-olds regain energy in their stride. I've seen 75-year-olds rebuild sensitivity they thought was lost. I've seen 80-year-olds fall in love again, with their partners, with life, with themselves. But none of it happens by accident. It happens when a man chooses to see his body not as a problem, but as a partner. When he decides that even after decades of habits, he can learn new ones, gentler ones, more mindful ones rooted in connection instead of escape. Because here's the truth no one talks about. the body listens. Even after years of neglect, it remembers how to heal. When you slow down, when you breathe, when you stop chasing the finish line and start honoring the experience, things begin to shift. You start to feel again, not just physically, but emotionally. And with that feeling comes something else, hope. So if you've ever caught yourself thinking, what's the point? I'm too old to change. I want you to hear me clearly. You're not too old. You're right on time. And this moment, this very moment, is the perfect place to begin. Because the final mistake is believing you're broken. And the truth? You're not. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you, not just for watching, but for listening, for staying open, for being willing to look at something most men avoid, not with shame, but with honesty. We've talked about 7 mistakes, some physical, some emotional, some rooted in habits, others in silence. But beneath them all, there's one deeper truth. Your body is still yours. Your pleasure is still yours. Your power, your presence, your ability to connect, they haven't vanished. They've simply been waiting for attention, for intention, for respect. You don't have to go back to being 25, you just have to begin being fully present at 60 or 70 or 80, and when you do, you may find something surprising. Not just stronger erections, clearer energy, or deeper sleep, but a version of yourself that feels more whole than ever before. This journey isn't about stopping pleasure, it's about restoring meaning. So whether you take 1 step today or 10, just know that you are not alone. And if this message resonated with you, if it stirred something inside, please share it. Until next time, stay strong, stay honest, and never stop learning how to love and honor the man you're still becoming. I'm Dr. Elias Carr, and I'll see you in the next chapter.